Can we blitzify ourselves? It looks like we'll be able to blitzify ourselves tremendously. Who is Mishustin, the Russian Prime Minister? Could he take over after Putin, and what is his role? I mean, the Prime Minister takes over after Putin, according to the formal arrangement, but that could just mean that Putin would have to engineer somebody into the Prime Minister role who he likes at that moment in time, if Putin has enough power to control the transition process, which at the moment I'm gonna bet he won't have when the time comes to it. So at the moment, Mishustin is just a nobody. He's just a functionary who executes on Putin's whims. Will withdrawing from Kherson destabilize Putin? Russia hasn't withdrawn from Kherson. You think that it's withdrawn. I think that it's withdrawn, but Putin doesn't think it's withdrawn. Ukraine is a fake state. Fake states persist for a bit. They're propped up from abroad, Putin thinks. Eventually that stuff doesn't last, it collapses. So we don't have Kherson today, we'll have it tomorrow. We don't have Kiev now. We have no capacity to even think about getting Kiev. We will have Kiev later, for goodness sake. Stop fussing about small differences. That's the key response. The second response is that Russians are used to losing. So they propagandistically played this well. They prepared the retreat, and now they have a situation that the regime rather likes, whereby these turbo radicals who want more imperial violence are split between themselves, and they're quarreling about the retreat, which also helps the regime. You've given many explanations about why it's naive to expect protest in Russia, but aren't you personally shocked at the mothers and wives of mobilized soldiers not protesting? Yeah, I am. Not surprised. You know, it's wrong to tell stories from individual cases, but the YouTube algorithm is really weird. So I was watching a couple of videos about sort of just contemporary Russian life, and the video came up about some kind of a non-fatal, even non-injurious car accident, where there was a mum and a daughter, and then the father came and he was preoccupied with the car, not with the kid. Please, of course, no, I'm not generalizing from this, but if that sort of reaction is disproportionately replicated in the culture, something is wrong. Something is wrong. And what is wrong? Well, the story is going to be about historical trauma. We've never talked about it as a one-off. We've only done it in drips. But yeah, of course it's shocking. It's not surprising. It's not surprising, but no, it is shocking. I mean, the problem is that the rage these mothers and wives have to feel is a civic rage, and the civic space is blocked in Russia, and so they're not feeling that rage. And you know, if you do find them feeling it, very often they'll just be blaming Ukraine. What's your take on conversations about important things in schools also now being planned for universities? I'm very open to the fact that we're overusing that term, fascisation, so let's just talk about it as a totalitarian term. Just depends on the mood. Sometimes it's okay to say it. That totalitarian turn happened to a degree of, let's say, 20-25% in Russia after the war began, and since then it's been going forward by a few drips. But one of the biggest domains for these drips has been the education system, from young children all the way through to the university situation. Now, most of these are gimmicky things that don't work, but could some of them work? Yeah. And what happens if they work? Well, you are getting, if you like, fascicized citizens. And that story about what's happening with the education system in Russia now is still part of that equation that we began discussing months ago on the main channel, whereby we said, look, this totalitarian turn happened. How far is it still going to go? And that's for the regime, a tension between keeping the population depoliticized, because we've still got this pattern where they are militarily mobilizing without politically mobilizing. So how far do you want to keep the population depoliticized, and how far do you want to begin activating them, in which case they're either going to become fascist citizens or turn on you? Can you elaborate on your tweet about Lex Fridman? I think Lex is extremely well-intentioned, but he's like a small baby wearing very fluffy flannel jumpsuits when it comes to politics. And he just tweets, most people are good, that's all. But he also, I think, is tempted to think that Vladimir Putin is just in a very destructive way deluded. But that deep down, he just loves his country and trying to do the best for it. And I said, it can be tempting to think that humans being bad is just humans trying to be good but failing. For instance, Putin loves his country, but his love of country is just very badly expressed. And this misses the destructive instincts and capabilities of human beings. We often fail to sufficiently clearly attribute negative values to people. We often think of people's bad actions as positive values gone wrong. And so we can say, well, Zelensky loves his country and he expresses his love in a very constructive way. And Putin loves his country too, but he expresses his love in a very destructive way. Well, are you going to say that Hitler's actions are an expression of love of country? I mean, you could say that, but by that point, your concept of love of country is so watered down that it's not going to have any explanatory weight. So it's important to attribute destructive values and destructive motives and instincts to people. And to understand what Putin is doing, we do have to attribute many destructive instincts to him. Will this war alter how Russians see World War II? Yeah. You know what? Personally, I have always liked Russian songs, from the 30s to the 60s as sort of kitsch to listen to in the background when I'm doing something else. And I kind of struggle to listen to Russian war songs, and I am not somebody who stops watching something because it's sort of ethically implicated. I don't do any expressive politics. I don't do any. But it has an unlovely aftertaste to me. And that means that sort of subconscious myth that these songs are connected to is just increasingly unpalatable for Russians. And what does that mean? It means that eventually what's going to happen is that the extraordinary victory in the war is going to have to remain celebrated, but it can no longer be associated with the Soviet state. So it can no longer be associated with Stalin, and that's much more truthful historically anyway, because Russia really won it despite Stalin, not because of him. But I think that victory is going to have to be reconfigured as a kind of people's victory together with other nations that won the war, rather than an achievement of the dictator of the Communist Party, which is how it's seen now. The Pope's misguided comments carrying on about the war. Several of you have noticed this. And Bob reached out on Twitter about it. Look, I am very slow to criticize the Pope on this, actually. So, has the Pope said some things that completely mischaracterize the conflict? Yes. Are the Pope's views about the war going to be infuriating for Ukrainians? Yes. Are his views about the war wrong? Yes, they are wrong.
But he is a man who is faithfully carrying on a series of traditions, and he is committed to standing for the idea that every human life matters, for the idea that we have got to have peace and mercy and so on. So think of it as an expression of values that would work really well in some kind of a 50-50 conflict where both sides were at it and had to stop. So there's nothing special he's getting wrong here. I think the Pope would have a propensity to get any kind of unequal conflict slightly wrong. And what he said about Daria Dugina weeks and weeks ago, that she was an innocent woman who was killed, well, no account of Daria, and I didn't want her to die, but no account of Daria could cast her as being simply innocent. I mean, that's just doesn't make any sense. But we have got to understand that what's being talked about there is the notion that every life matters, and it's being talked about in a very special way by this Pope, unlike his predecessors. Predecessors have tended to say, look, here's going to be a little border, and we're going to decide what's going to be in and what's going to be out. This Pope says, we're going to start like this and open ourselves up to the world. And we're not going to say that this is welcome in and this isn't. We're going to say that it's always a matter of exploration and openness, and we're going to be receptive, and I'm going to be talking not just about our people, but about really the whole world. So these are the Pope's instincts. He is a man with very sound integrity, but I mean, he's off the wall in his views about the war, but we've got to get the emphasis here, I think, balanced. Do you have any moral principles about how to approach this last question? YouTubers who've, as you put it, lost their rudder. I'm harsh on the truth, but soft on going after them, because I think the key challenges we face are systemic. It's not that Ricky has lost the plot here, and if he hadn't, our informational environment would be healthy and our public squares would be healthy. No. We've got some systemic issues with our informational environment, and it's an environment in which, as far as certain enterprises go, it's almost impossible to operate in a healthy way. So my approach is always to call out anybody who's losing their rudder, but not to do it in a way that says, oh, look at what a silly person Ricky is, let's all permanently avoid Ricky. But Ricky's lost the plot, Ricky is off the rails. Let's be honest, let's not say Ricky is fine. Ricky is not fine. Ricky is detached from the rails. Ricky is off into the forest. But let's see if we can in the future create a situation where Ricky is back, or where Ricky is closer to the rails again. So that's this combination of brutality, but also aspirational generosity with which I approach such things. Lots of love. Talk soon.